Hey, Justin Dyson here, Dyson Apiaries. Going to talk real briefly about the winter solstice and what it means for us as beekeepers. Stick right with us. So here we are. I'm a day late, dollar short like always, but today is December 22nd. Yesterday was December 21st, better known as the first day of winter, or also known as the winter solstice. For a lot of people, it's just the day that's close to Christmas, or it's the first day of winter. For the beekeeper, it is day number 1, and we need to always consider this day as probably one of the most important days of the beekeeping season, because like anything, first day of everything is pretty important, right? If you'll do me a favor, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like button. If you'll take just a second to do that, I would appreciate it. And we're going to jump right in here to a few things. So why is the solstice the first day of the beekeeping season? Well, the solstice is the winter solstice, so there's two in a year, a summer solstice and a winter solstice. The summer solstice is June 21st, and it is the longest day of the year. And the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. Here in my location, Piedmont of North Carolina, it's about 9 hours and 45 minutes, I think, in give or take a few minutes. That's the shortest day of the year. And what that means for the bees is we have gone through this cycle. It's like a 6-month cycle for the bees. Every 6 months we transition to something different. There's a whole lot of other things that kind of stimulate the bees to do various things, but one of the big stimulators is the daylight hours. So every 6 months we transition, and today being the winter solstice, or yesterday actually, that's the shortest day of the year. So today, if it's technically maybe a minute longer, the next day will be a little bit longer, and the next day will be a little bit longer. And to the bees, they see that as it's going to be spring soon, because the daylight hours are increasing. So in another 6 months, at the summer solstice, they'll start decreasing, right? So that's another signal to bees. That's what I said, is like a 6-month cycle. And what's going on in the hive is, and there's a couple things I want to talk about. One is what should we be doing now, and then the other is just kind of what's going on. So what's going on in the hive right now is we've seen a decline in brood rearing from, we might as well back it up to June 21st. Now, there's, like I said, there's some other stimuli out there, like nectar flow and, you know, pollen gathering and things of that nature. So if we move our bees to other areas and we see nectar flows in other places, that also stimulates some brood rearing and things like that. But this daylight hour thing, that's the big one. So from June to now, we've been seeing typically a steady decline in the amount of brood. You know, back in the spring we had this brood nest that was 10 frames wide, right? Now we actually hope that they've gone completely broodless and stopped rearing any brood. I'll tell you why in a minute. But so we've just continually shrunk that brood nest down, and you know, there may be still some, but especially with the Italian variety of honeybee, they don't really shut down ever, but they do back it way down. There's no pollen coming in, there's no nectar, the daylight hours are decreasing until now. And as that happens, that hive they don't have to maintain the temperature of the hive like they do when they're rearing brood. So they can drop the hive temperature down 70-75 degrees. If they still have a small little brood nest, that part will still be up there around 95-96 degrees, because that's what it takes to rear brood. So now as the bees start noticing that daylight hour increase, they're going to start warming that hive up. And they're going to start increasing the size of the cluster that has the higher temperature. Not to say that entire cluster is going to start being 95 degrees. That's the incorrect statement. But they will take that, what they may have covering brood down in this small, maybe baseball or maybe nothing, at 95 degrees, and now they're going to say, let's make that cluster, that spot, that 95 degree area bigger. And what that's going to allow to happen is it's going to stimulate the queen to start laying in that bigger area, because that now is conducive to rearing brood. And as there are enough bees to cover that area, they will make that bigger, but that's on out. So this becomes a really critical time of year for the bees. And this is for the next 2 months, it's when I probably see the biggest losses. So if we get our bees through the fall, when we see the big mite loads coming out this summer, end of summer, we see those high mite loads, the bee population is declining, the mite population's up here. We can see some problems in that time. But as we roll into the period immediately after the solstice, now we have some really old bees in this colony. These bees were reared back in October probably. And those are the winter bees that are going to live for 6 months or so, and they're already getting old. I mean, you know, the bees during the nectar flow are living 5-6 weeks. These bees are living 6 months, so they're living a longer time. But so we have the older bees. We have, in addition, we have no nectar and no pollen coming in, and that's a problem when we start rearing brood, because what does brood need? What do the baby larvae need? They need pollen, and that's the protein to grow the bees. So, and in addition, as we're warming up the colony, that takes energy. That takes a lot of carbohydrates, or the honey. And also to create the worker jelly, it takes honey and pollen. So now we're starting to use up resources, and they're not being replaced. The environment is not replacing those. The bees are not able to work. There's nothing blooming, nothing's going on. So what can happen is that colony, the old bees stress as they're rearing brood, and they're having to keep the hive warmer, so the die-off of those bees increases. And then in addition, the supplies in the colony start declining rapidly. So as we roll out to, as we get into February, you know, the red maples bloom in February, but the weather's never great for it. So they make a little bit, maybe sometimes not even a sustainable amount, but they make a little bit. So as we roll through that January-February period, it's really important that we pay attention to the weight of colonies, and that's the way I do it. I just reach down and pick them up, and that hive feels like it's got 5 cinder blocks sitting on top of it, and it's heavy. You always need to weigh both sides, because sometimes you have a big cluster of bees or on one side, or you have all your honey on one side, and it kind of tells you, gives you a comparison. That hive is heavy, so I feel really confident with that one. But if I go down the row and I'm checking these colonies, and I come across one that just feels a lot lighter than the rest of them, I have a problem. And it's a brisk 40-some degrees today. I think it's supposed to get down below freezing tonight. It's kind of unseasonably warm actually, but regardless, you can't liquid feed this time of year unless you have a few 60-degree days in a row, because you don't really want to be introducing that moisture to the colony. The bees are not able to really take that syrup this time of year. So what do? You can do some dry feeding. You may have a candy board on top. We can talk about that in another video, but you can look up candy boards, or emergency feeding methods like throw a newspaper on top of the frames where the bees can get to it, and pouring just dry sugar on it, and then the condensate in the colony will allow those bees to take that dry sugar and get it into a liquid and take that in. So a couple methods there, but the important thing is we need to pay attention to the weight of the colony and the population of the colony, because both will be decreasing. Even though they're starting to rear brood, even the population will be decreasing, but they're trying to raise some new bees that will take them through into the spring. So, you know, there's still a little dip there, and hopefully they recover and start back on the upward trend for the population before they get too far. Other thing that is really important this time of year, or it's a really great opportunity, I might say, is I talked about the brood from June to now has been decreasing. And one of the honestly, any of our mite treatments that we have out there for varroa mite work best if they're broodless. I mean, even your Apivar or something that stays on for 42 days, all that, it doesn't penetrate the brood. It's just staying on there and slow releasing, so that every time a pupa emerges, it's affected by that amitraz that's in the Apivar treatment. But one in particular, like oxalic acid, that's a fantastic treatment, but there's no residual effect and it doesn't penetrate the brood capping. So what better time to treat for mites than around the winter solstice, because we have the smallest amount of brood that we should have all year long, unless we have a queen event or something of that nature. This should be the least amount of brood that we're going to see all year long. If we can find a day when it's 50, it's a perfect opportunity that we can go down through here and we can do some mite treatment. So you choose the mite treatment you want to do, but I have another video about oxalic acid drizzle method. You can use vape. There's and some of the other treatments as well. A lot of the other ones you have to be careful about, like for instance amitraz. That's really not the amitraz, the Apivar treatment. That's really not an appropriate treatment for this time of year, using that slow release, because the bees really need to be moving around and contacting those strips and moving it among the colony. So that's probably not an appropriate one, but there are some other ones that are, you know, like fumigant type and things of that nature. And then you have the oxalic acid, and that's kind of the one I would kind of recommend this time of year, because it is the optimal time to use a treatment like oxalic acid. And we, like I say, we can do the drizzle or the vape or whatever you want to do with that. But great opportunity for that around the 21st. So what else are we doing? It's time to get ready. Like I said, today's the 22nd, so the day is day 2. It's time to get ready for the spring. If we have not already ordered our equipment and things of that nature for next year, we better be getting on the list, because February, March, it's time to crank, and we got a lot of work to do. We got to get any new equipment put together, and, you know, foundation nailed in, and working on our honey extracting setup, and cleaning up our mess from last year where we just threw things down because we were in such a hurry. That happens to me a lot. But so we're doing that. We're getting ready for spring, and we need to be getting ready for spring with intent. We need to be intentional about what we're doing. It's time to get serious about beekeeping now, not on the first warm day in March. Now is the time to get serious about beekeeping if we're going to do that, if we're going to be a beekeeper this year. We have to pay attention to the weight of the colonies and the size of the colonies. If we have one that's getting down to a cluster this big, if they are this big now, they're not going to make it without some intervention. So it's time to pay attention. Hope we don't have colonies like that. We hope we still have a good cluster that's you know, a couple basketball and a half or so. That's what we want to see, but we want to make sure that weight is appropriate, and we want to take emergency actions if we need to. If you're already empty of honey by now, you got a problem. But not to say you can't fix it, but you're going to have to take some different approaches. And let's go and throw a mite treatment on here, and let's get ahead of those mites while we can. We can hit those sporadic varroa mites right now while they're not hiding behind a pupa capping. So that's the winter solstice. It's time to get started in beekeeping, and I just wanted to throw this out here and let you guys know and give you kind of a bump. Let's go. It's time to get started. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like and subscribe button. Thanks for watching.